So why do you think people will choose us?
Yeah, look, I've given that a lot of thought, and particularly when you start out, and I was thinking the same thing. It's like, oh, am I making the right decision here going with gyms? I could go and get myself a trailer. I could go and buy the equipment. But the number one thing that, from my perspective, is that brand awareness is absolutely massive. It's not unwarranted. It is an absolute legitimate awareness that people have going. Once they see the gym's logo and the branding, they know not just generally what the service is, but importantly, they know what the standard of the service is.
So Glenn, thank you for joining us today on the Gyms Mowing and Gyms Group podcast as well. It's a rainy day today, so we're lucky to have you inside. But John Waltz is your franchisor. Actually reached out to John and said, do you have anyone good for the podcast to recommend? And he said your name first. So he says you're a bit of a star and great attitude. So it'd be great to have a chat with you about how everything's been going and just talk about your experience so far with Gyms Mowing and a bit about yourself as well. So first off, Glenn, what were you doing prior to Gyms Mowing?
Thanks, Joel, for having me. Look, before Gyms Mowing, I worked in healthcare for just over 25 years. So I trained as what they call a radiation therapist. So it's kind of like dealing with X-rays. I would often say our cousins are radiographers. So they do the taking of the X-rays if you have a broken arm or you need a chest X-ray or whatnot. But I worked as a radiation therapist. So we dealt with specifically cancer patients. So I worked in Melbourne at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre for, as I say, just over 25 years. Look, absolutely loved the career. It was fantastic. I felt like I got a lot out of it and put a lot into it. But for me, 25 years was, a pretty good innings. You don't sound...
Absolutely. It's a very long time.
That's it. I used to say I was a bit of a barnacle in the place there. But look, I really enjoyed it. And people would often say, oh, why change then? But look, I had no bad feelings about it whatsoever. But it was time for a change. It was absolutely time for a change after 25 years. You don't hear too much of that nowadays.
You don't really, do you? So it's very rare loyalty to a place or to where you're working for so long. And I credit to you for doing that as well. I was going to say though, time for a change. You're going, right, what do I then do? So do you want to talk through your thought process, or how do you then decide? A lot of people might be in your position, or they get to a similar sort of point and they just like, I want to do my own thing or have a change, but I don't know what to do. What was your actual process for deciding what you wanted to do?
For me, it wasn't really a quick process, but I was fortunate that it was somewhat drawn out in that once I got to, it was around that 25-year mark and our daughter was starting prep. So she was starting school and I decided that it was time to use up. I was fortunate enough after being there for so long to have a nice chunk of long service leave. So I thought I'm going to start using some of that up, and I decided to take a few months off. And that few months off, once I got a taste for the flexibility of life and being able to do school drop-offs and pickups and really be involved like I hadn't been grown up in sort of I guess you could say that day-to-day life of things, it was great. So I stretched it out a little bit longer and down to taking it at half pay. I think deep down I knew I really was valuing what I was able to do and really didn't want to head back to that 9 to 5. So I was lucky enough to have that crossover time. And for me, that's what really helped me, because when I got to the point where my leave had been used up and I had to consider going back to work, it really just took one meeting with the boss at the time, and nothing against my boss at the time, but it for me solidified that I had come to value that flexibility a great deal. I really valued my own ability to manage my time, and that was something that was really important to me in the family, being able to do that. So it was still a little bit unknown as to what I was going to do at that point. So I'd considered doing other jobs sort of in the same field or sort of off to the side. And it was funny. It was only talking to my partner about it, who said, "Oh, look, what about something like gyms?" Because I'd always, in a way, jokingly, half jokingly said to people, "Say, oh, if I could do anything, I'd just mow lawns every day. I'd love to do that." But you probably don't say that without having some reason for it deep down. And to be honest, I hadn't really given it much thought. So once it got to that point, I faffed around for a while, just not really wanting to do anything, because I was loving the flexibility, but I had to pay bills. I had to have some sort of income, but I wasn't really sure what to do. So that's when I I had it on my to-do list of a number of different things, and one of those was to get in touch with gyms. And so I did, and that's when I managed to make contact with John, who is now my franchisor, and that's really how it started. And that was September or October of last year. So I've just popped over sort of that 6 months time.
Yeah. So how's it been doing 6 months in your own business from being an employee for so long? Because I guess it must be a massive shift. You're 25 years routine, salary comes in every fortnight or whatever it is. And then now all of a sudden you're taking that away and you're jumping into this completely new thing. So how's that been, that mindset shift from employee to business owner?
Yeah, that's huge, and it was surprising for me when I underwent the training with gyms, and it's a really comprehensive program. I was amazed at how much of it was focused, and it makes perfect sense now, how much of it was focused on managing, running, developing your business versus simply just the practical side of doing the job, which of course is hugely important, but it was quite amazing, even when you were talking to people initially before I'd done the training and say, I'm getting myself a Jim's mowing business. And even myself at the time, all you could see was sort of pushing a lawnmower or doing the gardening or whatever, which is great. That's the job. But really it is learning and developing and building your own business, which is massive, but it's also really exciting. It's a real challenge that I probably wasn't expecting, but I'd like to think that I've begun to embrace that. It is constantly throwing up different challenges and ideas and ways you can do things, but certainly not in a bad way. I've really grown to enjoy those surprises that come up, because the thing is that I found, particularly with support from your franchisor and those other franchisees around you, that there's always someone out there who's been there and done that, or can advise and say, look, why don't you try this? Or, I had this experience, or get in touch with this person because they know exactly what to do with that sort of situation. So that has been a real surprise, but a great surprise for me, that contacts and the support that's out there when developing that business. And that absolutely just continues to build with the support and the ideas and suggestions that you get from those around you in the gyms group. It's been amazing.
That's great. And you mentioned something which I'll ask you a little bit more about, because I think it's a good point about the technical side, because a lot of the time when we get the feedback forms here, people say we should be doing more practical training as opposed to the theory-based sort of stuff, because obviously we hit home on customer service a lot in the 3 days, and you have the mowing side of it where you're learning about horticulture and introduction to those sorts of things. And sometimes the people think they're going to come and do training with whippersnippers and all that sort of stuff. So how did you go with the technical aspect? Because obviously you get all the theory, and then, all right, first week, all right, here I've actually got to do the physical job. How did you go with all that, and how did you go with training yourself in that?
Yeah, I was very, very similar in that I was expecting that it would predominantly be the practical, hands-on. How do you do this? How do you do that? But that comes pretty quickly, and I've got a lot of ideas and suggestions when I was doing my days out with various franchisees to start with, and even those days you pick up a phenomenal amount of knowledge and understanding from those that have been doing the job for such a long time. That was great, but also the support once again from your franchisor and those around you is absolutely top notch. So I felt very equipped going out to do the physical job, but even so, I'm still developing different ways of doing things and better ways of doing things. So there's always, I think you've got to be able to stand back and say, okay, do I know what I'm doing here? Do I need some guidance or assistance? Do I need to ask someone something? And that's where you can just get in touch with someone on the phone, or someone will come out with you. Not all that long ago, I was looking at doing a quote for laying some turf. And so I got in touch with John and said, oh, look, can you come out and help me with this? I haven't done one of these before. And no issues. Came out, helped me work through it. And I know that if there's any of those sort of situations that I'm not sure about, I can easily make a phone call or get some guidance with those sort of things. There's also, there's a lot of resources around as far as some of the, there's video recordings, there's advice you can get from people. There's a huge amount there. So I felt equipped going out, but even now I've started doing training in a Cert 3 in horticulture through gyms, and I'm really excited about that because that's really helping to build my knowledge base so that when people do come to you and ask you questions about certain things, that you're equipped with the understanding and you can answer those more technical questions when it comes to the things around not just lawn, but garden maintenance and planting and pruning and a whole lot of stuff like that. So that's recently commenced, but I'm really enjoying that. And there's a lot of people around the country that are involved in that from the gyms group. And I think everyone's getting a lot out of that training as well. So there's lots of opportunities there, but there wouldn't be a day that goes past that I don't come back with some new knowledge myself. And that is part of doing the job. And I've always said, even in my previous career, the best way to learn a job is to do the job and get out there, get your hands dirty. But as long as you can pull back when you're not sure about how to do something and seek advice and start to continue to develop that skill set, then you can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
And how did your body go with the physical work in the first? How long did it take you to get adjusted? Because I always ask this question to people, and everyone's time frame is sort of a little bit similar. But how long did it take you to get used to using those muscles, which you might not have used in a long time? And
yeah, that was a bit of a shock to the system to start with. And to be honest, even now, my body is still finding different challenges depending on the work that I'm doing. So a couple of weeks ago, I spent the day up and down a ladder because I was doing gutter cleaning. And that in itself was very different to what I'd done the day before. And I noticed that the day after because I was using my body differently. But that being said, it's been one of the best changes I could have made for myself, because I found myself in my previous job, and I'm sure a lot of people that watch the podcast have had similar experiences, that you stay in a career, you work your way through the ranks, and the higher you get, for want of a better term, the less you're actually doing the original job you wanted to do, and the more you find yourself sitting in front of a computer on your backside. And that's what I had found after all of that time, and that was, probably a real risk for me health-wise. And so now, in the last 6 months, it's been phenomenal. Like I often say, now I come home from work physically tired, but not mentally tired. Whereas it used to be the other way around. So I've lost a few kilos. I'm out there in the outdoors. Even today it's not fantastic, but that's okay. I don't mind a bit of rain. But so the body's still learning to adjust and manage, but probably the first 6 to 8 weeks, it was a bit of a shock to the system. But you push through it, and you start to get used to it, and then you see the benefits of it. I would highly suggest that to anyone. It's great for the mind, but it's great for the body as well. But you've got to look after yourself too in this sort of physically demanding role. But your body does adjust to it, and if you look after yourself and you pay attention to how you operate and how you use equipment and how you use your body, then it's fantastic. It's been really, really good, and that's a big bonus that I'm really appreciating out of it, because I think that's something that I didn't necessarily expect to get, but it's been fantastic, and it's good for the mind as well.
I love hearing that. And I was going to say as well, the types of services you're doing, you mentioned gardening before, you're doing the hort stuff, which is great, and you're in Ashburton. There's some really lovely gardens there. I've been there actually filming with John before and Des Warren. What types of things are you doing for customers? Are you doing a bunch of hedging, gardening, or you mentioned gutters before? What are you doing in your business?
And it's interesting, when I purchased the business, predominantly the work was mowing, and that was great because it was really good for me to get into that and develop my skill set and figure out, how do I do this? What do I do with this? How do I deal with this situation? But over the 6 months, I've noticed that a lot of my work that's come in has lent more towards the gardening side of things, which I really enjoy as well. I get a lot out of both, but it's probably heading almost towards 50-50 now. And even some of that has come from the already established customers that I was just doing mowing for, not just doing mowing, but I was doing the mowing for. And then once you talk to them and they say, oh, do you do gardening as well? Or you do gutters, or you do pruning, or all that sort of stuff. And once people realized, it sort of opens the opportunities, and people, once they've seen some of your work, whether it be the mowing or some part of that, then they go, oh, look, he does a good job with this. I'll give him a shot at this and this. That has really expanded a lot. So I guess probably started off with a lot of pruning and hedging, that sort of work. And now it's really opened up to ongoing garden maintenance, which I enjoy, because you get to know someone's garden. You get to know what's in there, what's working, what may not be working. And people are often seeking advice, and they say, oh, look, I've had this patch of garden for years. It hasn't been able to do much. Can you give me some advice on that? or something's going wrong with this over here. What do you think I might be able to do with that? And that's been a real great challenge for me, because I've had to say, look, I'll go away and investigate further. I'll come back to you with some ideas. And it pushes me to think about, okay, what can you do in this situation? What opportunities are there? And you go and consult other people around you with that knowledge if you need to. Go and spend some time going through the nurseries, through the different ideas, and that really helps connect to the customer, and they come back and say, oh, look, he's helped solve this problem for me. And I think a lot of that work that we do is you're either helping to solve a problem that somebody has. That problem often is a lack of time. So there's more and more people that just don't have the time or the patience or the enthusiasm to deal with a garden or mowing and things like that. So that's a really key service that we're providing there. And people are very open to ideas and how you might be able to solve that problem for them.
And why do you think people use Jim's Mowing, Glenn? So why do you think people choose us or they choose you compared? Because there's a lot of independence around, and and there's obviously Jim's Mowing, and we've got a lot of people around as well. So why do you think people will choose us, or what do you think in the market?
Yeah, look, I've given that a lot of thought, and particularly when you start out, and I was thinking the same thing. It's like, oh, am I making the right decision here going with Jim's? I could go and get myself a trailer. I could go and buy the equipment. But the number one thing that, from my perspective, is that brand awareness is absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. And it's not unwarranted. It is an absolute legitimate awareness that people have going. Once they see the Jim's logo and the branding, they know not just generally what the service is, but importantly, they know what the standard of the service is. And they know that if they have someone with the Jim's logo on, that they will come along, they will do the job, and they will do it to a very high standard. And if it's not to the standard that they expect, then it will be. They can say, look, you said you would do this, you come back and you get it right. And you don't just get it right. And I often say this to people, it's great to exceed what the customer expects, because then it adds to that brand awareness, it adds to the quality of it, and people will come back and say, they did an amazing job. Have a look at this. I would recommend this person. And that's what I'm starting to find now, which is absolute gold. And I expect that this is one of the biggest bonuses for being part of the Jim's group versus being an independent, is that the work that I'm getting now is, some of the work is coming through via Jim's, but so much of it is coming by the taps on the shoulder when people see you on the street, or they see you park next door to a job that you're doing, and then they come out, they see the trailer out there. You can't miss it. And it's absolute gold. It really is, because so much work comes from that, because they know the quality of the work that they're going to get, or they've used another type of Jim's service, whether it's cleaning or dog wash or any of the 50 plus that are available. It's absolutely massive. And even I was just thinking before meeting with you today, Joel, I was up getting a coffee at the cafe, and I walked down the street and bumped into someone that I haven't seen for longer than 6 months. So the last time I saw her was before I had started Jim's Mowing. And so we were just chatting and catching up. Out of that short conversation this morning, that wouldn't have been longer than 5 minutes, I've potentially got 2 jobs just out of that discussion as soon as I said I'd started with Jim's. And she said, oh, I'll get in touch because, my husband is ill at the moment, so I need such and such done. And I've got an elderly parent who needs this done. So fantastic. Here's your card. I never leave home without a card now. It's always on me somewhere, because those times that happens, it's absolutely crazy the amount of times that happens. And it almost sounds like I'm joking sometimes when I tell people, but there would barely be a day that goes past if I'm out working and I have the trailer on the street, or I'm walking down the street, if I have the Jim's uniform on, I almost sleep in the thing now, because that is some of the best advertising that you can actually get. And that is by far and away one of the biggest draw cards that I've found being part of it, is that it literally speaks for itself.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it, Glenn. I interviewed a guy who was an independent for a long time, and he came across the Gyms because he was moving into a new area. And I said, as an independent, how many times did someone come and stop you in the street or walk up to you at a job? And I said, no times. And I said, as a Jim's Mowing guy, I've already had 3 or 4 people in the first week come up to me and ask me for a card, or actually come up and stop me to try and quote on their place just because he had the Jim's Mowing or the Disney signage there. And I think it's crazy to me, like, if, there's obviously a lot of other options around for people, but it's crazy for me. People just don't appreciate how valuable that brand is on you, especially when starting out. And you're leveraging off all that, nearly 40 years. I think when Jim started in 1992, 40 years of all that goodwill. And you're talking about literally millions of jobs and millions of happy customers over the years that have used gyms. And you can come in at that point, in 2024 or 2025, and you can just build off that. And I think it's great to hear. And it's why Jim's so strict in customer service, because you mentioned something as well, which is really important about if they've used another gym service that had a good experience, they're far more likely to use this again for other things, which is why I don't think people really understand how strict the customer service standards are. And you would know as a franchisee how strict they are as well. So maybe do you want to talk about the customer service standards then, because I think not enough people in the public will know about this, but how strict are the systems from a franchisee perspective on customer service?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is one of the things that is so important, because it will make sure that when customer does get in touch, that there are time expectations as far as how soon we get in touch, how soon we're able to provide further information to the customer, whether it's making a phone call, whether it's providing a quote, whether it is actually getting a service to them if they need service that day or whenever that may be. That communication side of things is so crucial, and there's very clear expectations around that as far as how you interact and how you communicate with customers. I think that is absolutely imperative. It's something that I've really warmed to coming from my previous career in healthcare, where communication is absolutely of the essence, and it's really no different in this kind of business environment either, because it's the communication that makes sure, one, you get in touch with the customer and that you know what they expect. They know what we can deliver to them and the standard that we can deliver to them. And then once the job has been completed, we find out, are they happy with the outcome? And if not, what can we do to make sure that the job is completed to the standard that they expect? Fortunately, that's pretty rare. And the good thing, I think, as to why that's quite rare is because that communication happens, can find out what the customer expects. And they also know that if there's something that is not quite right, they can talk to you about it. Part of that customer service that is expected is building that relationship with them. And that goes a long, long way for a customer to be able to turn around and say, oh, Glenn, look, you did this, but can you make sure that this section's dealt with? No issues. I'd much rather hear that through that communication with the customer than have a customer at the end of it go, oh, he didn't do it to the standard I wanted. So that communication is, a really clear expectation, and there's a reason for that. And that's also one of the reasons why that the gyms group has that brand awareness and that they know what the standard's going to be, because there's that expectation around there with communication. There's an expectation around the standard or the quality of the service that is being provided, because I would like to think, and I know from the gyms group, that the product we provide is a premium product. The quality is top notch, and we need to make sure that is across the board. So the work that I do, as you mentioned as well, Joel, the work that I do also helps to represent the work that's done not just in the mowing and gardening side of things, but all the other divisions of gyms, whether it's dog wash or antennas or, mobile tires. It's really setting the standard for every element of the business that's being provided. And I think that's something that's really, really key in the way that the expectations are made. And it's very clear on franchisees that how you present and work in your own business and should be a reflection of the entire group.
I love hearing that. I'm actually put something in my training now because you said that. But yeah, you're a brand ambassador, right? So you're a brand ambassador, not just for yourself and your own business, but for the gyms group. And I think that's something that it's great to hear you say that, because that's exactly right. And a lot of really good franchisees I talk to have that mindset too. And being a brand ambassador for the group, understanding that job that you do really does have a massive compounding effect. If you do a great job, it's not only going to help you obviously get more clients, obviously via referrals and things like what you're doing now, which is great, but also does affect the other divisions. And that's why the gyms group and gym has to be so strict in customer service, just because that's what's going to drive us into the future. And a lot of these technological changes that are coming out with people using apps and stuff like that, I think they use them once and don't have a good experience, and then they come across the gyms, which is quite common. And I'm sure you might get that sometimes as well.
Absolutely.
And I was going to say as well, with your business, did you start with a new sale or did you buy clients, or how did you start up?
Yeah, so I bought an established business. We had just over 50 clients.
Okay, good size.
in the group, and look, that was perfect for me. I went out with a few franchisees before I made the purchase. I went out with a couple that had really significant big businesses, and they were amazing. This one for me was probably just the right size to start with. It was certainly enough to get me going, because I started towards the end of October last year. It was moving into, well, spring was there. Things were really taking off, and then it led straight into Christmas. So I was absolutely flat out right through over Christmas, New Year's, and the summer that never seemed to end in Victoria just went on and on and on, particularly in the city. My thoughts go out to those in the country areas, because it's been really dry, but it just plowed through for the 6 months. It's only now that things, with winter around the corner, things seem to be settling down. But so that 50 customers has really grown over that time. And I remember John, my franchisor, always says, look, if you can add even one regular customer a week, how that builds up your business. And there's absolutely no doubt that works well. And I think if you were to average it out over that time, maybe not one every week that I've done, but certainly jobs every week. They may not have all turned into regular customers, but probably every second one at least has. And that's good. And the thing is, I never say never, because even that one customer that you've had for a one-off job, the times that they get back on the phone and call you again to say, oh, now I'd like to do this and this, those one-off jobs still have potential for converting into regular customers. So I never discount any interaction that I have, because it's absolutely a surprise package constantly. I'm getting calls from people I've just given a card to, not knowing whether I'd ever, sometimes never thinking I would hear from them. They take it in, they stick it on the fridge. Someone called up the other day and they said, oh, it's so-and-so here. Do you, and I'm thinking, oh, who was this? We'd given a card to this gentleman because we'd found a set of keys out the front of his house when I was doing the job next door. And there was a set of keys out the front of the house. So he went and knocked and said, look, are these your keys? He ended up with a card, and he gave me a call last week to come around and do work at his place. And that certainly wasn't expected, but that's a classic example of what happens when people have interacted with you. We didn't speak anything about gardening that day. It was talking about this set of keys that was found on his front nature strip. And even out of that, work has emerged. So I don't discount any opportunity when you're engaging with people, because it is continuously developing that brand and that connection with people. It goes a very long way.
Absolutely. It's a great point. And I was going to say as well, equipment in your business, what equipment did you choose to go with? Did you have any philosophies around equipment, or what sort of setup are you running?
It's all pretty new to me at the time. So, but I've gone for all battery operated equipment, and that's been really good. I haven't had to worry about anything outside of the battery environment, which is great. It's all consistent for the most part. I set myself up with a suite of Makita equipment to begin, and that's been really good. So I dealt with one of the Makita reps initially that I made contact with through the gym's training, and I got sorted out with all of this, and it's still going strong at this point. Good. Look, it's been really good with the working in the battery environment as well. And, for me, that's been great. I remember at the training, it's interesting. You sort of have these debates about this equipment versus that equipment. But once you're out using it, and once you know what your environment's going to be like, then it starts to make sense. And for me, in as I often joke about, the wilds of suburban Melbourne, it's not too tricky. It might be different for different environments, but for me, that works really, really well. It's a different mentality, having to make sure that you've got that battery supply working and operational and charged up and ready to go. But, for me, that's been very smooth. Everything's consistent, and it's worked really, really well.
I think less servicing as well. That's the one thing I speak to a lot of guys that they've used battery or petrol. They sort of, once they move across a little bit, just to reduce time in servicing. Because if you have the petrol stuff, you've obviously got to service it and maintain it regularly. So how much maintenance do you have to do them? Is it just basically a check of the blades, or what do you do?
Pretty much. So look, I've replaced, certainly with the use that you get out of the equipment, I've had to replace a number of blades and things over that time. But for me, that's been really straightforward, because I haven't come from the environment where I'm been doing that stuff regularly. But that's been a great challenge as well. How do I maintain my equipment? How do I keep it in the top order, so that I'm operational, and I'm also delivering the top notch quality of service. I'm not out there with bits and pieces falling apart, because customers see that as well. They know what it's like when you're unloading the trailer, because often they're out talking to you. So they can see what you're presenting by the quality of the equipment that you're using and how you keep that maintained and operational for them. So that's been good for me to make sure that I'm doing that. And it hasn't been particularly difficult. It's just making sure that things are, you're checking things regularly. You're making sure that they're safe as well. Your blades are sharp, and you've got all of your consumables and things that you need for the equipment that you need to keep running. So that's been really straightforward.
And do you think the customers notice that using your battery? Because I've been hearing some stories. Some customers, in particular in some suburbs, will be a bit more conscious or prefer if the gardener uses battery-powered stuff, obviously less noise and other things. But you notice your customers actually notice they're using your battery and they mention it to you?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I've had countless conversations with people who, and even if it wasn't the customers, people walking along the nature strip, they'll stop and they'll talk and they'll say, "Oh, what are you using here? What are you using there?" Because they haven't seen it before necessarily. Particularly if they've got their old petrol powered one at home that they've been using for the last 30 years. Nothing wrong with that. But you do have those discussions, and customers notice that as well, because it's clean. There are no fumes. It's quiet generally. It's surprisingly quiet sometimes. So all of those things are noticed, and I think sometimes that can also be a point of difference as well at times. So I'm quite happy with that. And for me, it's been working really well with that equipment. So I don't see myself going away from battery operated whilst I'm continuing doing this. It's been out.
And the power and the mower's been enough for you? Because I've actually done some demo stuff with the Makita boys, with Ronnie up in Sydney and that, and I've seen it demoed, and it's John Wild's actually did a bit of a demo, and we've done some videos with it. So the power's been okay for you with what you've been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And all of my equipment is from their commercial range, so it's really powerful. So I've had absolutely no issues with anything to do with the power behind it. It's tackled everything and more that I've been able to throw at it. So including the odd the odd Barbie doll that I found in long grass or something in someone's backyard, unfortunately. But plenty of oomph behind them.
Well, hopefully some of the Makita boys are watching, or John, you can flick up the Makita boys and get Glenn some free gear down, and we can send it off to Glenn for a nice endorsement, which we don't. There's no paid endorsements here. We always ask this question, so it's just to see what people mention in regards to what they're using. But it's good to hear the Makita stuff. I know they're making a big push in the Australian market, like a lot of battery guys are, and they've got Makita's a really good quality. I'm just, being Japanese company, been around for many, many years. It's good to hear that the equipment's actually been good in the field for you as well. And I was going to say as well, challenges. So you always try to, sometimes it's too good to be true, but you mentioned the physical challenges, but what are the actual other challenges maybe people should be aware about in regards to doing a franchise or doing this sort of business?
For me, it has been probably the business side of things that has, yes, it's been a challenge, but I wouldn't say it's a bad challenge. I think it's been a good challenge, but it's kind of multi-layered, I guess you could say, because once I've managed to get my head around, okay, doing the physical job, then you think, okay, how do I get and keep customers? And then how do I make sure I'm quoting appropriately? How am I charging enough to make what I'm doing not just viable, but a strong and thriving business? What does the future look like if I want to employ staff to help me do the job, or help me expand as well? So what do I need to do with bookkeeping, and how do I develop in that area? So I don't see that stopping, and I think that's a good thing. I think there will be, the more you want to push it, the more you can. It's the world's your oyster as far as developing the business. I think it's just a matter of finding the right direction, finding the right support, knowing that you don't have to know everything, I think is important, but you need to find the right support to be able to develop in those areas. So, for instance, the bookkeeping side of things, I've got someone from Jim's Bookkeeping to help me out with that side of stuff, and that's fantastic because it gets to the end of 3 months, and I think, I've got, it's time to do my BAS. I wouldn't have even known what that stood for when I first started out. So let alone know how to do one. So that has been gold to be able to look at that, and then also to be able to say, okay, let's pull apart the figures. Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at where the business is strong. Let's look at where the business needs to develop or could develop further. So those kind of things. That's an approach that I've never really had in my mind. So that's been really good, but to also be able to get some guidance from people to say, look, think about this, think about what you might be able to achieve. Because when I first started out, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be out there mowing lawns. That's what I need to do. I need to pay the bills. I need to put whether petrol in the car or charge the batteries up. I've got to be able to cover that. But that was pretty much the breadth of what I was expecting. But once you get into it, and the doors open, you think, wow, I can really achieve whatever I want here. If I want to build the business, I can do that. If I want the flexibility to be able to do 4 days a week, I can do that. But just how do you navigate that, and how do you build it to what you want it to look like? And that, I think, is a great challenge. It's not something that happens straight away, because I think you probably, for me at least, you go in steps. It's like, okay, I've got this sorted. Now I'll start adding on. So after 6 months, I'm now looking at it and saying, well, what do I want to do with it now? Do I want to build it sort of with staff or trailers, or do I want to have that flexibility of 4 days a week, or do I really want to work weekends, or do I want to take a day off through the week? There's so many options there as well, which once you get into your routine, you start to see these opportunities, and I think that's really exciting, because there are so many things that I didn't expect as far as what you could do with the business, that now it's a great opportunity to stand back, have a look at it, talk to other people and see what they're doing as well. There's some absolutely magnificent examples of the way that, and not just in mowing, but a lot of businesses and gyms have grown around the country. So there's some really good ideas out there for what people might like to do. And it doesn't have to be that you're building it bigger than Ben-Hur. But as I say, it might be around, I need a comfortable business that will keep ticking along. But for me, the value is in the flexibility for family, or being able to tick the box for this, that, or the other. So there's lots of different things for people that would define what business success is for them. And I think that's important.
Great point, Nat. Is that something, so have you built your business around the drop-off and the pickup, or how have you built your business during the week?
So through the week for me, Mondays and Fridays are generally my full days. Sometimes I'll stretch them out, as long as I can. Often Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'll do school drop-off or pickup, but that's fantastic because I can do that. I can do school drop-off. We drive down you can't miss me, because it's, once again, talk about brand awareness. When you pull up out the front of the school in your Jim's trailer and walk in with your uniform, it's, there's plenty of cards being handed out then as well, but don't get me wrong, it is all about school drop-off, but it's fantastic. So I can be present for those times. I can be there. I can experience those opportunities, whether it be it's drop off or pick up, and I can do school drop off, and I can be working within 5 minutes if I've got a job locally, or 10 or 20 minutes if it's a bit further on. And I never used to be able to do that. It's the flexibility, but also being able to start work quickly. And you can manage that yourself. I look at those days, if I'm doing school drop off, I'll try and make it so that I'm doing work as close as possible to home, because it means I can start work quickly, and then at the end of the day, I can work through until 3:15, and then if I need to go back to school pickup, I can do that, and it works really, really well. So for us as a family, top notch.
And what did your partner think about everything? Obviously, being the one that suggested it to you. So how's he been looking at this and going, "Wow, this has been great"? Or have you been thanking him every day for helping you make that suggestion?
Well, yes and no, but It's been great, and for us, it's worked out really well because we both have the flexibility now within our respective jobs to do that. We're both working, but we've got the ability to be present as a family and to involved with school activities, or if we want to go away for a long weekend, I can say, okay, fantastic, I'll do a shorter day next Friday, but then the following weekend I'll do a bit of work on the weekend. We can massage it to make that work. So that's been really good for all of us. And I think that's something as well for people to consider as far as what's the benefit for you as the business owner, but also what's the benefit for your family, or your home situation, whatever that may look like. The benefits to that can absolutely be gold, and that's something that I look at now. And I think, gee, I used to spend, if you added it up, probably 7 or 8 hours a week sitting on a train or public transport going in and out to work. For me now, that's time that I've got back. And whether that's time that I'm out working or running my own business now through gyms, or whether it's time that I can dedicate to family, friends, even just a bit of me time. How fantastic is that? Like that never used to happen. So yeah, I can't highlight that enough, how valuable that is.
That's great. And income-wise, you've been happy with what you've been doing and how the business has been going for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, that was without doubt, that was a concern for me at the start, because you think, gee, I've spent all of these years building up my career, and you work through the ranks and you think, oh, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. I often think someone who used to refer to the golden handcuffs, and you can't leave your job because you put yourself in that position where you get used to the income, you get used to everything. And so for me, it was a bit of a leap of faith, thinking, what's it going to be like? And for me, it didn't happen instantly. It wasn't like a transition from this job on this wage to your business on this income. It's a business, and so it does shift and move a bit. But it's been good to develop that sort of business understanding, and I'll continue to do that with support from my bookkeeper and accountants and various ones, to understand what it's like owning your own business and the shifts and movements that occur throughout the year, because that is what's going to happen with something like this. But to be able to plan for that, to be able to not look at just one moment in time, but to say, okay, what's it going to be over the entirety of the yearly cycle of the business, and how is that going to work? And I'm really happy with that when you look at it, because, as I say, you can sort of walk out the front door and find yourself work. There's no shortage of work. That's absolutely not a concern, at least from my perspective and from my experience. It's how you operate with that. It's what you do with it. And I think that is so important, as to being able to operate within that. And yes, I'm still learning every day. I'm learning more and better ways to do that. But it's, income wise, I'm not concerned about it one bit.
That's good. And this might be a bit of a weird question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. How did you go with the identity shift? Because a lot of people identify as their job. So they might go, when you first meet someone, hi, I'm Glenn. All right, what do you do? And then you get that question, I work at that. And that's sort of your identity, and it built around that. And then you take that away. It can be a very interesting transition. So how did you go with that change?
Yeah, look, and that's a ripper of a question, Joel. I don't think that's weird at all, because I completely agree that you do, over such a long time doing the one job, that was my identity. And it's you build that up over that time. And for me, it was a bit scary doing that at the start. And I don't think I could have done it without, for me at least, I don't think I could have done it without having that bit of time in between. Because I started to, at least deep down in my mind, I think I'd started to step back from that identity of this is what I was doing, because, my identity started to become that of a parent. And yes, and for me, that was exciting, and I wasn't going to change that. That's not something I was just going to throw away. And that took priority for me. And then, so that shift in identity at that point helped me think, okay, I need to find something else that supports that flexibility and the desire I had for not just the flexibility, but for, being active and, being outdoors. Can't beat it. Absolutely can't beat it. But if I was to finish a career of, many years, as I'm sure there's plenty of people within gyms that have, and then start the following week or two later, that would have been a really big challenge for me. And I've spoken to a few of the franchisees that have found themselves in that position, and it was challenging for them. And I think that's completely understandable. And I'm still finding that even now that shift happens fairly gradually, but it happens when you speak to people, and it happens as you build up that pride of what you do. And I think that's so important. And you'll see that with Jim's Group business owners everywhere, that there is that element of pride in the work that they do. And I think that's so important. And with that pride comes the identity of this is part of me. This is part of my business. This is part of what I do. So, and I think that's a really sensible question, because it can be quite scary and threatening to start with, because you have an identity, and to pick yourself up and head in a completely different direction. And for a lot of people, it really is a completely different direction. But I would absolutely encourage you to give it a shot. It's not as scary as you'd think.
Well, you said something at the start, Glenn, which I think is really admirable, and I think people can relate to. As you said, I changed my identity was a parent first. When a lot of people might have that corporate career, and corporate career or the jobs first, and family or parents second. So you've instantly had that shift to I'm a parent first, and I don't mind about what vehicle I need to do to support my be a parent in my family. But now, obviously, the great thing you can do now is I've gone from working for here. Now I'm a business owner. Well, how do you introduce yourself? Do you say I'm a Jim's Mowing franchise owner, or do you say I'm a business owner, or I own my own business? What's your, let's say, identity now in regards to the work side? What do you say to people?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Currently, I still say I've got a Jim's Mowing business. That identifies it very clearly to people. And I think I found that putting Jim's in there is people know exactly what you're doing, But it really is about being a business owner, and that I think that's a real identity shift for me, because I've never thought of myself as a business owner. Building up that business understanding and that business knowledge is really exciting, and even sometimes that can be a bit scary. But knowing that there's plenty of people around that can help you develop that is fantastic. So I'm a business owner, and I think that's a great way to head for a lot of people. And I never thought I'd be doing that.
How old's your daughter as well?
She was 7 yesterday. So yeah, 7 yesterday. And look, talk about the flexibility. It was her birthday yesterday, so I set my schedule so that I could have the day off. Fantastic. I never would have been able to do that in my previous job. You'd have to take a sickie or something to do that on a slot. But it was great. So, I plan ahead. This is what I'm going to do on that day, because I can go out on Saturday or Sunday, whatever works. For those things, you can have a really, really nice balance.
Well, good on you for doing that. I think a lot of parents wish they could do what you're doing. It's great to see that you took some action. You took some action with it as well. I was going to say as well, last question before we go. We've nearly gone for an hour, so I appreciate your time and all you've told us. Is the advice for someone else looking to do what you've done? Because I reckon you provided a great bunch of advice, but is there anything else you would say towards someone in regards to doing this? Like, is there something they should look out for, or is it do multiple observation days? What was the piece of advice you would give someone maybe looking at doing what you've done?
Yeah, look, it was tricky when I first came to considering gyms. I guess I didn't know what I didn't know. I was showing up pretty blinkered, and I heard someone use the term recently about job snobbery, and I've never really heard the term job snobbery before. But to be honest, I look back at it now and I think I probably had a bit of job snobbery myself, thinking, am I taking a bit of a step back to go on my lawns? That's absolutely not the case. I look at the benefits now that I continue to get out of this change in career direction, and it's huge. So I'd say to people, regardless of where you are at the moment, whatever career or profession or job you find yourself in, don't be afraid to investigate what benefits you can get out of something such as this, because I continue to see benefits that I didn't even expect out of this. Yes, there's the flexibility, there's movement and exercise and being outdoors, but also I'm just getting such enjoyment out of interacting with people in a different way. And I've always, in my previous career, I was interacting with people every day, but it was for a very, very different reason. Whereas now I'm still interacting with people every day. They say, don't you get lonely out there sort of working by yourself? Because largely I am solo at the moment, but that's certainly not the case. I'm dealing with so many different people every day. I'm learning a lot from them. I'm seeing what they want out of their environment, and I'm helping them be a part of that. So you can contribute a lot to people by doing this job. You can contribute a lot to yourself and your family. So think about what your priorities currently are and think about what you might like them to be. I'd be pretty confident that by making this sort of shift, you'd be able to tackle a lot of those priorities.
I love what you said then, Glenn, the job snobbery, because Jim and I, we do a lot of videos about it, and we saw there's a lot of stigma sometimes with working with your hands, and you're right. There's some people look at that, they don't realize the gym's mowing or the gym's cleaning person is probably maybe, not assuming maybe financially maybe about the same or better off, plus they can do work on their own schedule, whereas the other person's got to wear a suit, be in the office all the time and have to stress and not see the result of their work for many months and countless emails and this and that. So I agree with you. I think there's that job snobbery from a lot of people still, unfortunately, when it comes to doing a small business or some home services business. And I think people with AI coming in going to do what it's going to do most likely to a lot of the office jobs, I think home services is the place to be. So I think you've made a great decision.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joel. I'd completely agree.
No worries, Glenn. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Glenn. We've nearly gone for an hour as well. Appreciate your story as well. And a lot of the advice you provided was great. I'm sure a lot of people thinking about gyms who watch these will really be thanking you for what you've been saying. And hopefully that might be the push they need to do and spend more family time as well with their family, which I think everyone wants to do. They just need that vehicle to do it sometimes. It's glad to hear you've been able to do that with your business and you're really, really enjoying it. So we appreciate your time today on the Gyms podcast.
You're very welcome, Joel.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you for listening to the episode of the More Than Just Mowing podcast by Gyms Mowing. If you do need help with your local gardening expert, please give us a call on 131 546 for Australia, 0800 454 654 for New Zealand, or head to gymsmowing.com.au or gymsmowing.co.nz. If you liked what you heard, please make sure you leave us a review as well, wherever you consume your podcast. We appreciate your support. And until next episode, we hope you have a great week.